Vinyl Vision.
Hello, folks. Thanks for tuning in to the latest episode of Vinyl and Vision. Here we are with episode 68. My very special guest is Felix Bechtolsheimer. I think I got that right. Felix for the band Curse of Lono. That's what he told me to say. Because, people screw up the name, I'm sure, often. Felix is a wonderful person. I was very happy to have this conversation with him. He is in the band Curse of Lono, as I've said, but they're from London, England. They're a British band. Interestingly enough, the album that Felix chose was another British band, a little band, I don't know, you may have heard of them, I don't know, the Rolling Stones, Exile on Main Street. What a motherfucker of a record. I say that lovingly. I mean that in a good way. It's a great record. It's a double album. So just right off the bat, I'm going to tell you now, if you're expecting us to cover every single song on the record, we don't. Sorry. I've cut it down. I whittled it down to very concise songs. Only 8 of them we're covering. Okay, so if anyone was expecting to hear something, or tackle one of the songs, then we may not have covered it. But I think it was great, and it was a great conversation. I appreciate Felix for taking the time, especially because I messed up and showed up late, but we made it happen, and it was a really great candid conversation, and very revealing and fun, I thought. So Felix is in a band, the Curse of Lono, and it's a wonderful record. It's finally been released in its entirety in the United States, so you can listen to the entire album on all the streaming platforms. And I encourage you to do so, because I won't do it justice just trying to describe it. I just encourage you to listen to it, and if you like it, obviously you can buy it. They do have vinyl out. They have CDs, LPs, and digital download. Anyway, if you just do the digital if you want for now. Wait till they come on tour. They may be in the United States. Maybe Felix says most likely next year, early next year. So, follow them on the social medias and all that stuff, and get updates as to when they will be near here. They are going on tour in Europe. I believe that's starting May 10th. I could be wrong. You should visit their website, curseoflonoband.com, and see all those tour dates. And if you are in any of those countries or in any of that path of their tour, by all means go and see them. It should probably be a really good time. I'm looking forward to seeing them at some point when they come to America, because I don't think I'm going over there soon. When I do, I'll go check them out for sure if I'm over there across the pond. So that's it, folks. I really appreciate you coming and listening and watching, depending on wherever you are digesting this media. And all that we ask that you do here is all the things you do with the internet. Please like, share, comment, rate, review, subscribe on any and all platforms that you digest these things in. We'd really appreciate it. Thank you very much, folks. Enjoy.
Hey, man, how you doing?
I'm fine, Felix. How are you?
I'm very good, man. I'm very good.
All right. Well, hey, it's a pleasure meeting you, and thank you
Nice
for
to meet you
joining
too.
me.
Thank you.
How's everything in London going?
Good. Can't complain at the moment. I hope it stays that way, where it's everywhere. If we feel like we're free again.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. But
Cool.
It seems to be okay. We've got our first tour starting, not this week, but the week after, and we've got a little festival next Sunday. And the tour manager called me this morning and said, I've just tested positive. And I sort of did the calculations, and I went, forget it. We don't need you for the festival. By the time the tour starts, you'll be okay again. So, I'll take that.
Yeah. Well, I wish you the best of luck. I hope nothing happens. No one contracts anything while you're out.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
You can't do anything about it, can you? You just gotta go with it.
Yeah. That's why, just hoping the best, man.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your band, Curse of Lono. You guys have a new record out.
Yes. A record came out actually end of last year over here in Europe, but it comes out in the States end of April.
Okay.
And yeah, it's been a strange time. We were releasing records quite close together, and then obviously with the pandemic, everything stopped. We had a lot of touring plans. We had a headline tour of Germany and other parts of Europe that was postponed 3 times and then cancelled I cancelled it actually in the end, because I thought it's not fair to, if people have bought a ticket after 2 years, they've got a right to change their plans, I think. So, but yeah, everything's been strange, like with all other bands, and the record's out, and it's been a very strange release because we recorded it in a gap in the middle of this lockdown, and then we had to sit on it for a long time before it came out. And now it's been out over here for a while, and now we're finally getting to tour, and it's bizarrely, we're starting to get a lot of radio play now, but normally that happens before a record comes out, whereas here it's just all happening afterwards. So I'm disoriented, but I'm happy. So I'm not complaining.
Right. Yeah. It's all kind of complications due to COVID.
Yeah.
It's so strange. Yeah. So that's why it was a little confusing for me too. You know, I've read your bio and I've been trying to listen to that record. Here in the States right now, there's like 5 tracks available, I think.
That's all. Okay.
I think so.
That's why I keep getting messages from fans over there going, why can't I listen to it? And yeah, they've done, to be honest, that's all the label who sorts that stuff out. And it's the first time. Normally we release worldwide at the same time.
Yeah.
But there was some nice interest from various publications and things in the States. So I think they were just sort of getting all their ducks lined up and then working it out.
All right.
What order to do it all in. I'm just along for the ride. I just sing the songs.
Are you really? Because actually, I looked into Submarine Cat. I mean, aren't you involved with the label?
I am. Yeah. Well, I've sort of founded the label, but these days I try and take a back seat to it. We've got a really good team who sort of do the running of the label. I had a bunch of mates who didn't have labels and who desperately needed them, and who had very good, like the first person I signed was John Murray, who's a good friend of mine. And he's one of my favorite songwriters on the planet. And I was hanging out with him, and I kept bumping into him at festivals, and everyone kept going, oh, that man's a genius, but you can't work with him. He's crazy. So I was like, well, I'll work with him. And I think it was a month later, I was hanging out with the Alabama 3, who did the theme song for The Sopranos. And they're a cult band over here. So they play big shows. They tour every year, and they've never gone away. For 25 years, they've had that cult status. But they've been making a living. I mean, they've been consistently releasing records, but they've been mainly making a living out of their live show for the last, at least the last decade.
Yeah.
And I was sitting down with them. They said, oh, we want you to play, some of the shows with us. And they lost one of their founding members who passed away. And they said, look, we'd like you to play at the wake, the memorial thing for him. So we did that. And we were talking about records, and they said, oh, I wish we had someone who could help us put a record out. And that was just after I'd had the same conversation with John Murray. And I said, you know what, life's too short. Let's just give this a shot.
Yeah.
And we got a really good team in place and managed to get lucky and sign another couple of acts, one who I'd been a big fan of for a few years. And it's now growing very rapidly. It was just me to start with. And now we've got a full-time team of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 full-time members now, full-time people at the label, and a whole bunch of other people cruising around helping making it happen. And I'm sort of lucky that I'm allowed to go off and make my own records and go off on tour now and not have to worry about it too much.
Yeah. Well, that's your main passion, right? I mean, that's kind of why you got into music in the first place.
It is, but I mean, you know what it's like. If you make music, you make friends with people who make music, and then you want to. Every musician wants a family, and I like crazy, dysfunctional lunatics who no one else will work with. So when everyone else goes out, we're not dealing with those people. I'm going to send them my way and we'll give it a go.
Yeah. Has it, and it's all worked out well so far, huh? Like none of that
we've
craziness.
Had our bumps and it's been up and down, but at least it's not boring in Submarine Cat HQ.
Yeah, that's great. So listen, I was looking for the record. I was looking to see if there a way that I could listen to the entire new record, because I looked you up on Bandcamp, and I read a quote that you had on there, and it said in reference to your new record, it said for people in cars, you say that we're all in these bubbles.
Yeah.
So how is your bubble right now?
Well, I think the bubble's bursting because I think we're stepping out. We're actually allowed to go and play shows and do stuff. But yeah, I think I think we are, and I think that it resonated with me, but especially during the whole lockdown thing, where I don't know if they called it that in the States. Over here, they called it this is your bubble. And it was, your bubble was I think pretty much a legal thing even, where you were allowed I think it was 2 or 3 people in your bubble. And those were the people you were allowed to have contact with, but no one else. So people had to choose their bubbles. They had to choose whether we hang out with these grandparents or these grandparents, right. Because the risk, to keep the risk of infection down. So that was a whole thing. If you were caught going for a walk with someone with a can of beer in your hand, it would be like, are you in the bubble together? And I don't know. When I then saw these photos of Mike Mandel's photos from people in cars, his photo book, it's all these people in their cars, and I just thought they're little bubbles. It's every car has one person or more who are in a relationship, or they work together, or they're in a family, or they're in an argument, or whatever it is. There's all these little stories. Every car that goes past this intersection, there's a story inside. There's something that person or those people in that car are experiencing at that moment. And the photographer is sort of trying to peer into it, but he obviously with the camera, you can't work out what's actually going on. And I found that really interesting. And I found it, in a weird way, it resonated with me during that time when we were all in these bubbles and we couldn't see people. I was down at my mum's place during the lockdown, and she wasn't there. And my sister lived 20 minutes away, but we weren't allowed to see each other because we weren't in the bubble. And then slowly things eased. So it was just something that was constantly on my mind at the time. And I just thought it was a really cool representation.
Yeah. Well, it did make sense too, baby, because I guess we didn't call it that here in the States, but I definitely heard people talking about it in that way. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that it's even internationally now, because you're in London, that all of these restrictions are loosening up, and it just.
I mean, over here, there's very little restrictions now. You can pretty much do what you want.
Yeah.
I know I was over in Italy last week, and there you still had to wear a face mask in the bus and on the plane and at the airport.
Yeah.
And I had to fill out all sorts of forms to travel. Whereas over here, you can fly into the UK without having to worry about anything now.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. Cool. I don't have any plans to do that soon, but at some point I'd love to.
Yeah.
It's been a long time, man. I haven't been in London since 2001, I don't think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I spent some time over there. I was dating a girl that was going to college in Egham.
Yeah.
What was that? Royal College of the Atlantic, I think it was called.
Yeah, I don't know. I know where Egham is. I don't know what the college is over there.
Okay, yeah. So I spent some time there in London and then bounced around some parts in Europe.
Nice.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it is. Especially when the weather's like it is at the moment. It's great.
Yeah, very cool. So I asked you to come onto the show to talk about a record that was important to you and influential to you. You chose the Rolling Stones Exile on Main Street.
Yeah.
Tough one, man. This was a tough one.
Oh man, I wouldn't know where to start on that one, but I don't know. That's my album.
Yeah. And I've seen you mention
it. Any bar anywhere on the planet, if that record's playing, I feel like I'm in my hometown. It's just, I've listened to that album, I have no idea how many thousands of times, and I always pick out something new in there in the background. It's got so many layers, that record.
Oh yeah, right.
And it's mixed in such a way where the crazy thing. I always think, God, if I was mixing this record, I'd mix it totally differently, but it wouldn't sound as good. My instinct would be, no, you've got to turn that up, you've got to turn that down. But it sounds the way it does because they did it the way they did it, and I think for me, it's a masterpiece. Of total chaos. And I don't know if you've seen that. There's a documentary about it made by a guy called Stephen Kijak, and they're talking about how the band would disappear into the basement of Villa Nelcott to do their sessions every night, and it would sound absolutely horrible. They said it was just the most awful sounding racket that you've ever heard in your life. And then some time at like 4 or 5 in the morning, suddenly they go, I think we're ready for a take. And then they do something, but the rest of the time it's just total chaos. Yeah. And it represents everything chaotic and debauched that turns into something beautiful for me. I just think it's the most decadent sound that I've ever heard on a record.
I think you're right. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. And now, speaking of that kind of like that chaotic response to it, or the kind of like, you know, kind of appreciation of the chaos that this
Mm.
recording was. I mean, what how did you get turned on to this record?
Oh man, I don't know. I think when I left school and I got thrown out of school and I moved to London, there was a bunch of kids I was hanging out with, and at the school I was at before, everyone was listening to, you were either into techno, electronic dance music stuff,
Mm-hmm.
or you were into heavy metal. And I liked like my Misfits and my Black Sabbath and Guns N' Roses and all that stuff, but I always loved the Stones. I always loved the Beach Boys, which everyone would laugh at me for. I was the only kid, decades after they'd made their hits, but I'd be driving around with the windows down listening to the Beach Boys on full blast. So I always loved that kind of stuff. And when I came to London, the people the Misfits I started hanging out with and playing in bands with, were obsessed with the Stones. And it was Beggars Banquet, Let It Bleed,
Sticky Fingers.
Sticky Fingers as well. But it was mainly Beggars Banquet and Let It Bleed, and then Exile on Main Street was the one that everyone was just. I suppose my best friend was more into Beggars Banquet and Let It Bleed, but for me, Exile just had something, and it's a long record. It was a double album when it came out, and you don't skip around that. You just turn it on and let it play out, and then you probably start again at the beginning. So it's just, I had a lot of great parties to that record, and it also got me through some very difficult times. So it's sort of, it's been with me. It's been a very, very good friend to me for a very long time.
Yeah, I see. And so what was music like for you growing up? I mean, you're saying that you got turned on to this record when you moved back to London, when you left school. Was that high school?
Yeah, that was high school. I got thrown out of high school when I want to say 17. And before that, I'd listened to the Stones, but it was more the earlier stuff. I knew Satisfaction. I knew the big hits.
Sure, Under My Thumb, stuff like that.
Yeah, I didn't get under the surface really. And growing up, it was very tribal. I think much more tribal back then than it is now, listening to music. I think back then you were either with these people or you were these people. And there was a few indie kids out there who sort of liked a bit of both, but you couldn't be friends with someone who liked the other stuff. That didn't work. You were in your tribe. Whereas now, I just don't think, I see it, the kids who come to the gigs, and especially some of the younger artists we have on the label, it's not that tribal. People want to try a bit of everything. They want to find what turns them on, not be dictated to. You really have to have long hair, you have to wear a leather jacket, and you have to drink Jack Daniels, and then you're with us. Or you have to pop loads of pills and
rave all night long
in the corner, and with a rave whistle around you, blowing into a whistle, and then you're with these guys. I think it's much more open nowadays. But for me back then, it was quite tribal, and I sort of fell into this rock crowd. But then I wasn't fully into all of that as much as some of my friends were. Right. And then, when I moved to London, I got kicked out of school and I moved to London and met people who were living and breathing the music thing a lot more. And that's where I got turned on to a lot of that kind of stuff. And Exile was one of those records.
Okay. And have you always been a musical person, like ever since you were a child, or when did you start learning music?
Not really. I mean, my parents were not big on music. My dad had a very small record collection, a lot of Johnny Cash, a lot of Harry Belafonte, and a bit of ABBA.
Interesting. Yeah.
And he loved the Beatles. My mum loved the Stones, but there wasn't that much music. But it was my grandparents who both played the accordion. So, but it was, I grew up in Germany, so there's a lot of sort of German Oompa Loompa music. And as a little kid, I'd dance around, and music other than that was very much like the other kids. And I was at boarding school, and I was having a really tough time at school. I was really, really tough time. And one of the older kids came into my room and said, "Come with me." And he took me to his room and he gave me a couple of shots of vodka, and he put on Never Mind the Bollocks by the Sex Pistols. And I was just completely stunned. I'd never heard anything like it. And then when it finished, he made me listen to the whole record, and then he gave me another couple of shots, and then he put on Pink Floyd, The Final Cut. And they're obviously very different bits of music, very different styles and genres.
Sure.
But it was, for me, they were two sides of the same coin, because they were both protesting, they were both angry and disillusioned and disenfranchised in a way, but in saying it in different ways. But the message I got from that was, one, people are pissed off about stuff and they sing about this. And there's more to music than just, I love you, baby, I miss you, baby, spend the night with me, baby, oh my God, I'm so sad you've gone, baby. You know, there was just something much more than that. And it was amazing. I mean, it was amazing. And then the same guy then had this horrible nylon strung acoustic that he couldn't tune properly. And he started playing Pigs on the Wing by Pink Floyd and something. And I just suddenly went, I can do that. And it was just something, because it was a very different system that I was angry with. Obviously, you know, the Sex Pistols were against the whole, the actual governmental system, the societal system, you know, that's a different thing. And the same with Pink Floyd. It was a very political, the Final Cut's a very political record. I was pissed off at school. I was pissed off with the injustice of having 18-year-old kids beating the shit out of 14-year-old kids and stealing your food and telling you what to do when they had absolutely no right to do that. I was pissed off with people my own age telling on each other. There was no one had any loyalty to each other. So that was the system I was pissed off. It was a totally different thing to the Pistols or to Pink Floyd. But I sort of went, yeah, I'm with these guys. I like this. And I went home for the school holidays and I told my dad, I need a guitar. And he was going, you don't play the guitar. And I go, yeah, I'm going to learn. And he goes, bullshit, you're going to learn. And in the end, I dragged him to this guitar shop and I begged him. And he said, look, I'll do a deal with you. I'm going to get you. And it was a Squire Stratocaster. And he said, I will buy that for you. And if you're still playing it every day in a year's time, it's yours. And if not, you pay me back. And he said many years later it was the worst mistake he ever made, because I never put the thing down again. But
well,
yeah,
you showed him.
Yeah. But for me, that was something that was, it was really important. And that music then grew. It wasn't just, yes, of course, my friends then all got into, you know, Metallica and all this stuff, which is very angry, you know, rock stuff. And I get that. But for me, I'm not saying the Pistols is intellectual. It was just shocking. I'd never heard anything shocking like that. Sure. Whereas Pink Floyd, I was really drawn to the words. I was just amazed by that they could come up with stuff like that. And so yeah, that kind of started my journey then. And then once I got that guitar, my roommate, he was having a hard time. He bought a bass, and we made the most god-awful racket for the next, I don't know for how long. But we had a lot of fun with it. But that's when I got seriously into music. Before that, I was just like any other kid listening to a bit of pop.
Right. Okay. So now about this record again. So I found something kind of unique about your choice, because, you know, I've been listening to your catalog. I've listened to everything that you put out so far. I'm pretty sure, you know, the EP, the As I Fell record, Severed, and then the songs that I've heard off the new record. And they're very different styles of music, it seems. You know, I mean, like what Curse of Lono doesn't seem directly connected to like something like the Stones, Exile, and Main Street.
No, and you're right. You're absolutely right. And I used to, with my old band, Hey Negrita, we tried to get a bit closer to it. It's very, very difficult. I feel like one of the things with Exile on Main Street is you listen to the vocals and the shambolic nature in which stuff comes together and just sounds amazing, but it feels rough around the edges. And I think that record has been studied by people for decades, trying to recreate, how do we get our vocals sounding that loose and that tight at the same time? And it's a really difficult thing to do.
I mean, you kind of have to be Mick Jagger and Keith Richards. I mean, there's no,
but then you've got the backing singers on there as well.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know, we tried to analyze it once. We were going, is it that they're really tight, the backing singers, so Mick can just veer off deliberately? And we never really worked it out. So I try not to. Exile on Main Street gives me has given me an awful lot over the years, as have the Rolling Stones with their whole catalogue. But I don't try and recreate that, and I don't think I could. I have tried on previous records. I've had songs where I go, yeah, that could be a bit Stonesy, but it always falls short of the mark. There, that's something I don't try to imitate. It's just something that's, you have records that are soundtrack to your life, that are for segments of your life. And Exile's been there for me all the way through. That's why that had to be the record for this show that I wanted to talk about.
Yeah. Well, I've heard you mention it a number of times, and then a bunch of interviews that you've done in the past. Yeah. So I mean, it obviously is very important to you, and I can see why. I mean, it's a great record. I mean, and I don't put any weight behind what an artist creates and like what kind of influences them to get there, because it's so much all the time, always.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of fun.
I don't think you can control what comes out. And I feel like with this new record, People in Cars, it's the closest I've got to peeling back all the layers of the onion and just being completely honest. I was so broken when I went in to make that record that I just didn't care anymore. The whole world was collapsing, and my personal universe was collapsing. And I just needed to make a record. I needed to go and do something to take my mind off it. And I just think it's the closest I've come to just me. And I think the reason that may sound pretentious, but I was trying to work out why I think that. And I think it's because I sing. It's the closest to my talking voice that I've ever sung. I don't know if that's why, but that's why it just feels very natural for me. Yeah. Because it's in the same range and with the same amount. I don't push my voice at all, and it's just sort of flows out. And that's why it's quite an important record to me. I couldn't have made, if I'd written a record like Exile on Main Street, there's no way in hell I could have recorded that at that time. I needed to do something a bit more gentle and considered, I think.
Right. And it makes sense. I mean, I've read about some of the tragedies that you've faced during or prior to the creation of this record, and it makes sense. I mean, it would be hard to be able to make something Stones like, something with the upbeat tempo.
It wouldn't have been possible. And I mean, I was lucky. There are some upbeat songs because obviously I was writing this record before we started recording. So at that point, it was interesting because it's very much a record of two halves. And, both in terms of writing and recording, and they don't completely align. But I was writing this, we just had an amazing year. We did, I think, 2 US tours. I don't know how many times we went to Europe, had the most successful headline tour of the UK we'd ever done. And then ended that 2019 with 3 big anniversary shows with Alabama 3, which were just 2,500 people, and it was a wild party and it was amazing. And so I was writing during that time, and so there was some upbeat stuff going on, and the more rocky stuff on the album is all from that time. And then very at the beginning of 2020, obviously the COVID thing hit, and that was I was meant to be on a long tour of Europe, and we could see everywhere closing down, and I was like, okay, and my dad had just gone into a coma, and I called the promoters in Germany and I said, guys, I can't do this tour. And they said, you have to. And I was like, look, every country is going into lockdown, and I cannot afford to be stuck in a van in the middle of Europe and not be able to get home. My dad is in hospital. And we had a big argument. And in the end, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to cancel the tour. I have absolute faith that the government's going to cancel all tours anyway. And they did. 2 days later, everything was shut down. But my wife had COVID very early on. So we went out to the countryside. I took the kids, my wife, and, went out there. And then my dad was in a coma. He came out of that and then took a turn for the worse. And I was very, very, very lucky to be able to fly to Switzerland in the middle of the first lockdown. Go and be with him on his last night, which was one of the most difficult things I've ever done, and one of the hardest things I've ever witnessed, seeing someone in so much pain. But I was very grateful that I was able to do that. I was very grateful my mum didn't have to be the one who had to go through that. And I know people who lost their parents and lost loved ones during the pandemic and were not able to do anything. They weren't able to be there for them. So I was very, very, of course it was a tragedy, but I was very lucky to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And we lost my uncle 4 weeks after that. And then in August that year, I lost an ex-partner of 5.5 years. And my band split up. So by the end of that, I was just like, man, this has been one hell of a year.
Yeah, right.
So and that was hard. We'd made the first draft of the album, and I kept writing. No one wanted to put a record out in the middle of the pandemic, so I kept writing. And then the band members started going into full-time day jobs, and some weren't very happy with the direction it was going in musically. And so in the end, we had a good chat, and I said, listen, who wants to commit to touring and doing that? And no one was really up for it. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to carry on this project as a solo project. And luckily I got everyone's blessing and went back in the studio and recorded the songs that are getting all the airplay now, luckily. So otherwise it would have been embarrassing if it had gone the other way, but it was a very difficult time, but I needed to make a more introspective record, I think. And the later songs that were added to the album were very much of that ilk.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful record from what I've been able to hear so far. I mean, yes, it's I can feel a lot of your struggles and your pains and your griefs through the music. Your singing voice is excellent. I mean, you very reminiscent of Leonard Cohen.
Thank you. I'll tell you, that's a huge compliment. Yeah, I wanted very much, because I don't want to scare people who are listening to this off by thinking, oh my God, it's going to be one of these miserable records with someone howling about. I very much tried not to do any of that. I tried to keep the singing style very conversational, and it's storytelling, and there's hopeful moments on the record as well. So it's not all downbeat.
Yes, no, absolutely.
It was just the space I was in, and some of the songs are a little bit sad, but not all of them, so
it's human. I mean, because I think that lyrically it can certainly reach people in different ways. So I think it's great. You did a great job.
Thank you.
So now I was speaking about the differences between Exile and Mainstream and what you do, and actually there are some kind of like parallels. I feel like maybe if not through the music directly, just kind of lifestyle things that have been happening to the Stones at the time that they were recording this, and obviously some of the stuff that you've gone through.
Not at the time of just a disclaimer, not at the time of making this record.
no I mean not exactly.
I think I mean, that's true, and some of those themes have come up in this record, and I always swear that I will never write about that stuff again. And every time I make a record, there's a couple of songs that poke their heads above the water that for some reason, some part of me, some sinister part of me wants to revisit that time when I was, living that kind of lifestyle as well.
Okay.
And I think
we'll talk about that, because I definitely had some questions. I mean, it's obviously it's no secret, like what.
You can ask me anything.
Sure.
If I don't want to answer, I'll just pretend I can't remember.
It's like, oh, I think I'm losing you. This connection's gone really bad.
Yeah, sorry, I'm out.
No, I won't be that pressing.
Oh, I don't mind at all.
Okay, well, so let's see. We should probably just go ahead and get into this record. Let me ask you one question before we start. So Keith Richards has been quoted about this record saying that things were changing and I was no longer interested in hitting #1 in the charts every time. What I want to do is good shit. If it's good, they'll get it sometime down the road. So at this point in your career, do you ever consider legacy?
It's probably all I consider, because I've never had a #1 record, and I don't think I'll probably ever get one. So a large chunk of what I consider is what will the kids and my grandkids and whatever say one day. I always have this mad. There's an American artist called David Ramirez, and I did some shows with him out in Scandinavia, and he did a song. I think it was his grandmother or great grandmother, and they found out that she was a songwriter, and he'd never met her, but he found this out, and he managed to get hold of some of her music, and it was just magical to him. And I always wonder what will happen if one day a grandchild or a great grandchild discovers that, the granddad or the great granddad was a bit of a lunatic, and he's went all over Europe, all over America, touring with his band, various bands, and he wrote this stuff. And that's important to me. And I mean, for my kids, it's very important to me as well. But I very much, what Keith said about Exile resonates with me, because that was very much, not that I was aiming for #1 in the charts, but you always have that thing where you go, oh, I wonder how this song would go down in a big venue, you know, or a big festival, or this or that. Because I was beaten when I started making this record, and there was no prospect of any live music. And people were starting to, my agent was saying, God, I wonder if we're going to grow up with a generation of kids who never go to a gig, because we didn't know what would happen. There was no vaccines or anything at that point. They didn't know.
Right.
And
wow.
So the only thing that really mattered to me is making something that I was really happy with, and that Ollie Baston, my producer and my main collaborator, that he was really excited about. And unfortunately, that probably didn't help me much with my ex-bandmates, because I didn't have the headspace to deal with 18 of them, about 4 of them, and everyone else, and these people, and the people at the label, what everyone thought. It was just like, no, we're going to do something in the studio. The studio's here at my house. We're working here, and we're going, if it makes us feel something. And that's when we know we've got it. And who gives a shit if it's going to get played on the radio? It really doesn't matter. You know, who cares about all of this stuff? You know, it just doesn't matter anymore. Right. And so I get where Keith, I mean, for Keith, that's a bigger sacrifice, because he was making #1 records. But for me, I felt that freed me up a lot.
Yeah. Well, see, that there's a parallel. Exactly. I mean, that's very Keith, I think.
Yeah.
So one more thing I was thinking about before we start, the Stones. Okay, so you are from London. I guess you were raised in Germany, you said, but
I
but
was
do you
born in
consider
Hamburg,
yourself?
and then I moved over to the UK when I was 9, so I've been here most of my life. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I mean, so the Rolling Stones is like a local band to you.
Well, I think by the time I was old enough to see the Stones, they were a global phenomenon, you know.
Well, yeah, but I mean, but they're a London band. They're an English band, right? You know, I mean, how does that what is that like perception like in England of the Stones?
I don't know I mean, yes, they are a London band, but do you not think that
they're so godly that it doesn't even matter
now, aren't they? I don't think people go, oh, that British band. It's just the Rolling Stones.
Oh, okay.
That's how I see it. I mean, but that said, when I've read every book about them, I've watched every movie about them, and the early days in London, obviously for us, that's key, you know, sort of that they were part of that British movement. But I think by the time I was old enough to connect with them, they were just such a big phenomenon. It didn't really, the London connection, it's still there in the background, but it's not as big anymore.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Cool. Well, so now you chose Exile on Main Street. We're going to try to talk about it. It's a double album. There's 18 songs. So I tried to get
a copy out. So I've got the track listing in front of me.
Well, so I mean, I try to do myself a favor, because I was blowing my mind over it. I was just like, this album's super long. It's an hour long. There's so many songs. I'm going to try to just dissect this and cut it down. And I cut it down to 8 songs that we're going to cover.
Okay.
Now, I'm sure that you have some songs, so I'll give you one. If we're not going to cover it, I'll tell you the list. If we're not going to cover it, I'll give you one that we can cover that I am not prepared for. How's that sound?
That sounds good.
All right. So now I try to choose 2 songs off every side.
Okay.
And I did that specifically because what I read in one of the books and the research that I was doing was that each side of the record kind of has a specific vibe to it, and it kind of flip-flops. There's so like the first side of the record is like this, it's the party, and then the B side is like the hangover.
Yeah.
Okay. There's the rock and roll side A, and then there's the cosmic Americana side B.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So the songs that I chose was side A, Rocks Off and Rip This Joint.
Yeah.
Side 2, Sweet Virginia and Torn and Frayed.
Oh yeah.
Side 3, Happy and Ventilator Blues. And then the final side, Shine a Light and Soul Survivor.
Cool.
So is there one that we're not going to cover that you think you would like to cover?
Uh, no, I'm good with those.
Sweet. That sounds
I'm good
great.
with those. Yeah.
All right. Well, I at least wanted to give you the opportunity because I know that I've spoken to people in the past and skipped songs and they were like, "Oh, that's my favorite song." You
No,
know?
I'm good with that.
Okay. Great. Well, then we'll start off with the first song, Rocks Off.
Mm.
It seems fairly evident that this song is filled with drug references, and as to whether Mick had these lyrics in praise or in criticism is debatable. So, why do they make doing drugs sound so deplorable lyrically, but so exciting musically?
That's a good question, and I think it's very hard to. Um, I think without being there when they wrote it, it's hard to know, isn't it? Because there were so many different camps. You had the heroin camp of Keith,
Hmm.
Sam popped over. You had Bobby Keys and his guys and whatever they were popping at the time. Mick, I presume, was on more of a coke trip, but was probably
Sure.
not that impressed with the smackheads not turning up for the sessions.
Right.
And so I don't know to what extent, I don't know what point the lyrics came in or if they were brought in later. I don't know enough about the process, but I
Hmm.
think it's very difficult to get away with, I think, especially back then, to sing about drugs quite so openly.
Yeah.
To then try and make them sound glorious would probably be even harder to get away with, is my guess. And I
Yeah.
don't think they were glorious. I think Keith was in a lot of trouble at the time.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
there was a lot of bad stuff happening. There was a lot of unhappiness in the camp. There was a lot of tension and friction between the band members, I think. So I think it's probably that the intellect, this is how I read it, is the intellect is saying, this stuff's bad, kids.
Right.
Whereas I'm blasted and I'm rocking out, and that's
Right.
kind of, but I'll have another one, please, sir.
Sure. Sure.
That's kind of what I read into it. And I mean, Rocks Off, what a way to start a record. I mean, there's no, ambient introduction or,
Right.
easing in. I mean, this is just straight in from
Right.
the top.
They
Hit
just
me,
they just introduce like this is what it's gonna be, guys.
And when you've got a record that's an hour long and you just go, no, we're going balls to the wall, we're straight in there with this. It's pretty, I mean, it's pretty spectacular.
I agree. Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, it's a great record. This is a great party record in
Mm,
general. I
yeah.
mean, you can't
And
go
it's one you
wrong.
can put on in the background, and some people be sitting there listening, other people be swaying along, other people just be having their conversation, doing whatever, and it just glues the room together, I think.
Right. Right. So now, I don't want to bring a lot of attention or focus a lot on the whole idea on the concept of like drug use because this record is just it's just so heavy in it. Really, I mean, like every song almost has some kind of like drug connotation almost,
Mm,
and I know that you've had experience in the past. Obviously, you've experienced some trouble with it and recovery.
yeah.
So like I said, not focusing on it, but I do want to mention a little bit of it because it's
Absolutely.
curious. I'm curious too. I mean, I've never been a big user. I've never,
Yeah.
I don't mind a joint here and there, but
Mm,
I've never got into hard stuff. Um, did you do much writing while using?
no.
Oh,
Short
yeah,
answer. I
sure.
was no, I tried for a little while, but it wasn't really any good. And
Yeah,
I'm not very good at, when I was on heroin, I was not really able to do anything else. My partner at the time, was at times able to hold down a job. I held a job down for about 3 weeks, and then that was a disaster, complete disaster. I kept missing my train to get there, and I was, turned up armed with loaded syringes in my suit pocket, to try and then go to the bathroom while I was working. I was a disaster. So
yeah,
the idea of me making any kind of, I was in a band when I started doing heroin, but I got fired because I just could not sing. There was Geffen Records in America were interested in the band, or so I'm told. I didn't last much beyond that. It was just a bit of a disaster.
mm,
So I couldn't. Keith says that he did some of his best writing in his early years of addiction.
yeah,
he's a better man than me, because I didn't come up with a single thing that was worth keeping during
Yeah.
that time. And I gave up. It didn't take long. Out of the 5.5 years I was using, I think I probably dabbled with music for the first year of that, and it was not very good. And after that, that was it, until I finished. Yeah.
Because is using as far as an inspiration is concerned, is it overrated? And from what you're saying, it sounds like that kind of is.
Well, I think I've probably got a lifetime's worth of stuff to write about.
Sure.
From what I experienced, and that may sound like I'm glorifying it. I'm not. I'm talking about the losses. Not, you don't write about this great high. I mean, I've never found any use for writing about that.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of losses incurred. There's a lot of people I know who are not, or I knew who were very close to me, who are not here anymore. So there was a lot of, and going that deep down when you really just don't think you can get out, and you don't think you're going to survive, and people are dying all around you, and you've just overdosed for the 6th time in 6 months, and you just don't, you're stuck in a mental hospital in Germany, not quite sure what's going on anymore. You can write about that for many years, but during the time it was totally useless to me. So I don't recommend it.
Good. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, because unfortunately, I mean, I'm a fan of rock and roll. Okay. So I've been following it along for a long time. And it just seems that like it always is it's something that kind of is ever present. And you hear about these people that are fantastic. They're amazing writers and so forth, that create these amazing things. And you find out that they've been like strung out the entire time that they've been doing it, and it's just so strange.
I think that that's changing. I don't know. I mean, I don't. Maybe I'm too sheltered these days. But when I was growing up and when I got into music, okay, for me, a large chunk of it was rebellion. I wanted to, rebel against whatever it was. So I liked the idea that these guys were drinking Jack Daniels, snorting lines off their amplifiers and all that stuff. I was a part of it. I remember my best friend, who's sadly not around anymore, and he was in a band and I was in a band, and we always did gigs together. We weren't making music as great as the people we admired. We weren't. I mean, I know that, we were not having the impact on our audience. We didn't have that audience. We were not famous. So how do you try and convince yourself when you're 17 years old or 16 years old that you're one of them? Well, I can get as high as they did, or at least you think you can. And it sort of became a rite of passage. You kind of had to, it felt like you had to be, if you weren't, there were people who weren't into drugs, but then they were drinking heavily, and you had to sort of be seen to do all that stuff. The kids nowadays aren't like, I don't know what it's like in the States, but over here, half the kids oh no, I'm sober this month, I'm doing this, and I'm eating right, and I'm, and it's about the music. And I'm told my best friend's a booking agent for some big acts, very big sort of global acts. And he says they couldn't do that anymore. The schedules, the pressure, the stuff that comes with making a living out of music at the top just doesn't work with that. You won't, yes, if you're that big and then, nowadays, and you can carry on, but he says it'd be very hard to get to the top nowadays if you did that. These kids work, they have to be on 17 different social media platforms and do interviews all around the world and collaborate and make videos and be on TikTok and God knows what else. It doesn't really suit. I mean, junkies are notoriously lazy. It doesn't really, I can't imagine sitting there, doing a hit and then getting on TikTok for 5 minutes. It just wouldn't happen. So I do think it's changing.
Okay, cool. I think that's great. Let's move on to the next song, Rip This Joint. Not to get too descriptive, I suppose you could say this song is a bit of a tribute to America and the southern states in particular. You've spent time here in this country, right?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about some of this land and what then that you've explored?
Well, I don't want to, obviously I came to America on tour probably 40 years after the Stones did, so it's a very different country, but I think my guess is there will be some similarities. it felt like a movie. My first US tour, we played in New York at the Living Room, and then went down Virginia. I'm trying to think. I can't remember all the bits. North Carolina,
Yeah.
Nashville. We did it. There was a few more, but I can't remember them all now. And then all the way down to Austin to do South by Southwest. And then the next one we toured with Tony Joe White, and we went all the way up the West Coast.
Okay.
It felt like a movie because you'd seen these landscapes, you'd seen these diners, you'd seen these bars and cars and all the stuff that you guys take for granted out there. We knew that from the movies. Right. And now you're in a van with 4 of your best friends on the planet drinking beer and playing music, and people like it. And you're just like, this is like the fucking movies. And I think for the Stones, it was a different thing. I think the Stones, they conquered America back then. And it was obviously their place where they made a lot of money. They spent a lot of time with a lot of lovely ladies, took a lot of drugs, and lived the dream. And I think by the end, also the nightmare, by the time it came to Exile on Main Street. But they were sort of, America was a huge thing. And you have to remember, the Stones started out of a total and utter passion and dedication for American music. That was what they were obsessed with. You know, when Mick and Keith met, it was about, oh my God, you've got that right. Oh God, let me play you this. Right. And trying to work out how to sing and sound and play like these, the old blues artists. And that was a big thing over here in the UK in the 60s. I know that I had a long conversation with Steve Winwood about this quite a few years ago, because a lot of people don't know this. When Steve was 14, 15 years old, the rule over here was with the Musicians Union that when an American artist came here, only the featured artist was allowed to perform. So if it was, I don't know, any big blues artist, they were not allowed to bring their band. They had to use British musicians.
Oh, okay.
When they went on tour. And Stevie Winwood, at the age of 14, 15, was out there playing the Hammond organ for all the big blues legends. And he learned like that. And he was a little white kid from Birmingham, Britain, not Birmingham, Alabama, you know, and he you know, he had his first #1 record at the age of 15, sounding, when you listen to I'm a Man or Give Me Some Loving, you go, that sounds like an old black man. And it was a little skinny white kid who's 15 years old from Birmingham, you know. And so there was a whole scene over here with these, I've read a lot about this, you know, where they were just obsessed with American music. So for them to finally actually get to go over there and have people like them, I think must have been an incredible experience.
Right. Plus, I mean, you know, they were huge music fans and of American music specifically, you know, the blues. And now they're traveling these lands that these people that are their inspirations came from.
Yeah.
You know, so that's why I'm kind of curious how did it feel for you traveling around this land, like, you know, exploring these parts?
I think it was the same, just probably a bit watered down, but we were in it was bliss. That first tour was just, I mean, it was just incredible. I think it was, you know, one of the best couple of weeks of my life. It was just absolutely magical to be. It's stuff you didn't think you'd ever get to see. And yeah, it was like living in a movie. It was amazing.
Cool. And then now, so on the other side of the coin of this song, the breakneck pace of this song and the overall punk feel of it, right? Makes me feel like Rip This Joint is a way of describing like a great rock and roll performance.
Yeah.
You know, it's so intense. Can you tell me about either the greatest rock show you have witnessed or performed?
The greatest rock and roll show I've witnessed.
Or performed.
It's so hard. The Stones are definitely up there.
Yeah, and when would that be?
I first saw the Stones on the Voodoo Lounge tour in 90, I want to say that's 94 probably.
Okay.
No, maybe a bit later, 95, 96. I can't remember now. But it's mid-90s. It wasn't the greatest rock show I've ever seen. I'm trying to think now what that could have been. There've been so many. Pixies. First time I saw the Pixies
Yeah.
at Brixton Academy. First time I saw the Pogues. Are the Pogues rock and roll, or are they too Irish? I don't know.
I think they
But
qualify as rock and roll. Yeah.
that was just madness watching them. That
Well, see,
was
that's the thing. That it doesn't even matter what genre it is. Where's the madness happening? You know, that's
that was just incredible. I saw Bon Iver the first time he played at Green Man Festival over here. 5,000 people, and you could hear a pin drop. That was not rock and roll, but
yeah,
I mean, it was just
powerful.
very, very powerful, very total magic. I'm now cheating because I'm saying too many. You know.
That's okay.
And the greatest show I've ever played. It's hard to put it down to one, but I have to say the last show of our UK tour in 2019, the last headline tour I did with the previous lineup of the band, was down in a little place in Bristol, which is called the Louisiana. And the Louisiana, I think, holds 125 or 150 people. That's it. It's tiny. Okay. But they packed them in so tight. There was people who bought tickets who couldn't get in. And this place, everyone from Amy Winehouse to Oasis to the White Stripe, like everyone has played at this place. It is just one of those places that when you first start touring, you play the Louisiana. And it was sold out weeks in advance. And it was just, I mean, that whole tour was crazy. But that was an amazing gig.
Yeah.
And there was one other one on that tour up in Glasgow where it was halfway through the second song or third song. It was a quiet acoustic song. And every single person in the room started singing every line of the song. And then they didn't stop for the rest of the show, to the point where we had to take our in-ear monitors out because we just couldn't hear ourselves anymore, because we had ambient mics up and they were shouting into those. So it's like, right, get this off. So, but I think that show, I remember our drummer saying to me, that's how you finish a tour. You know, that was it was electric in there. It was really electric.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's the one.
That sounds good. That definitely fits the bill. All right, let's move on to the next song, Sweet Virginia.
Oh man, that's one of my favorite songs of all time. And that was one of I had a few battle cry songs when I moved to the States to get clean, I didn't actually do rehab out there. I went to detox and then went into a halfway house. And one of the battle cry songs I had for that first few months of agony coming off the stuff was Sweet Virginia. So it's wading through the waste. You know, that was my one of those songs. The other one was actually Willing by Little Feat was one of the other ones. And there was a few, but Sweet Virginia's been with me, and you know, it was with me before then, but during that time it became really important.
Yeah. Willing?
Oh yes, what a record.
Yeah, I just happened to have this sitting by.
I'd never heard of Little Feat when I moved to the States, and one of my roommates was obsessed and got me completely hooked on them. So
yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, I've listened to that one before actually, but it's not too close.
Sailing Shoes, and that's a beautiful song. It's a great record. That.
Okay, well, I'm going to put it on soon anyway. That's why it's over here. So, yeah, let's see, Sweet Virginia. So, like I said before, the drugs are always finding a way into these songs, right? But moving away from the simple motif, this song has been described as being hopeful. And the shit you have to scrape off your shoe, as disgusting and bothersome as it may be, is merely a distraction from the bigger picture. So what kind of shit have you had to scrape off your shoe?
Oh God, what kind of shit? Yeah, what kind of shit haven't I scraped off my shoe?
Better question. Haven't you?
I mean, it's hard to. I think the time when that song was most important to me was a very, very tricky time, because I had moved to the States to get clean. I'd just spent 8 days in a government-sponsored experiment in a mental institution in Germany, where I'd signed up for it on opiate addiction, and it did not work out. And it was the lowest I'd ever been. I had nowhere. I didn't have any place to live anymore. My my partner at the time was sleeping with everyone she could get her hands on, it seemed to me.
Yeah.
And I had absolutely no money. I had nothing. And I moved over to the States. My uncle took me in, and then they got me into a detox ward. I'd overdosed so many times. I had abscesses down my arms. And, you know, and people were dying. A lot of my friends were dying in the first couple of months I was out in America. A reasonably well-known TV presenter who I was very good friends with passed away from an overdose, and it was my dealers who supplied her. And that got quite difficult. I was in a halfway house, and suddenly I had a call from the press wanting to talk to me. My ex-partner at the time was sort of trying to hide out from the press because she was involved in all of this, and trying to rebuild some kind of relationship with my family, having not spoken for so long. I didn't really have any friends left.
Yeah.
And I was suddenly in South Florida where it was fucking hot, and I was sweating, and I was really unwell, and I was coming off heroin, methadone, barbiturates, and alcohol, and it just felt like death. And listening to that song, just, I don't know, for some reason it was one of those songs when I put it on, I could just, you know, get me going for a little while. And I had this thing at the time where my uncle had a little Jeep Wrangler, and he would lend me the Jeep, and this is once I'd completed my first couple of weeks of detox, and I was allowed out during the day. And I had a pile of Stone CDs with Exile was always at the top. And I put that on the passenger seat whenever I felt really bad or temptation was coming, knocking on the door. I would just drive all the way along the ocean, A1A, as an hour, all the way to Miami if I needed to, and back again until I felt better. And Sweet Virginia was one of those songs that just made me go, come on, you can do this, get through another day.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of shit to scrape. I don't think I finished that. I don't think you ever finished scraping the shit off your shoes in this life.
Well, at least you can like bask in some of the positive right now. Like now you're in recovery, and now you're doing much better, and now you have a family, and the band's you know, picking back up again. And
yeah, definitely.
So yeah, it's something that's kind of
it's
where you're
very
gonna...
positive. I'm not in any way, you know, I don't wish it on anyone, but I also don't sit there and bemoan what happened. It's, you know, it's part of who I am, and it's part of my crazy story, you know, and I'm very lucky. I'm very, very lucky that I got out of that, and that I get to sit here and talk to you, and you know, put the kids to bed, and go and play a festival next Sunday and do all that stuff. So, you know, I'm one of the lucky ones.
Right. Absolutely. I agree with you. All right. Well, let's move on to the next one, Torn and Frayed.
Yeah, the title says it all, doesn't it?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, it's definitely got some poeticism in it. I mean, I think that lyrically the song kind of covers a lot. Well, not a lot, but just kind of it can be taken in a couple of different ways, you know. So I've learned that this song could be about a down on their luck musician just trying to get by through the drab and murky club circuit. And I really like these lines, though. On stage, the band has got problems. They're a bag of nerves on first nights. Do you ever get nerves these days?
Yes, I do. I'm not. Yeah, I do. I get nervous. It tends not to be too bad once I'm actually on stage. I get nerves. Go, oh my God, we're going on tour and doing this, and is it going to be any good? And are people going to like it? And is anyone going to show up? And am I going to forget my words? Am I going to forget my chords? So I do get nerves. For me, that, I don't know, it feels like the Stones at this stage, they had so many internal tensions, and here they do the opposite of what's expected. They don't go to a big studio to make that hit record that everyone wants to prove to the world that they're still number one. They do the opposite. Mick and Keith, despite all the tensions, just spend this time with, you know, Mick Taylor and Charlie and all the others. But they spend all this time just making and writing this record. And it must have felt to them a little bit like going back to basics. And it's sort of a bit of an anthem. Let's everyone, those lyrics that you just quoted, everyone who's played in bands sort of relates to that in some ways, don't they? And they
Sure.
almost make it sound, they make that shaky, shitty gig sound kind of cool because it's Mick singing about it and Keith playing, you know, it's sort of, it sounds like it's cool to be there.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's certainly about kind of like a down on the luck musician paying their dues, if nothing else, you know. So
I wonder if it's autobiographical as well.
well, see, that's the thing where I'm saying that the song could kind of be taken a couple different ways, because from what I've read in the research, I mean, it could be argued that it seems like Mick is actually kind of singing about Keith, because he's kind of like this. Not that he's down on his luck. I mean, obviously he's very successful, but you know, with the
he was
struggle
with
of
the
it,
stuff that was happening with the heroin and
yeah,
you know, wasn't it around that time that he was potentially facing jail time, and he was facing not being able to get back into the States again, and there was all sorts of, maybe that came slightly after, but it was around that time there was all sorts of stuff going on. Right. He had a lot of problems with his relationships at the time, you know. Yeah. So I think, yeah, it kind of,
that's why there's a line in this song, I can't remember exactly, but it's something about so long as the guitar still plays, like, what, I forget the words.
Yeah. She can steal your heart away, is that it?
Something like that. Yeah. And then that's kind of like what it seems, or he's kind of like in tribute to Keith. I mean, because as long as that guy's still kicking, that band still has a chance. Yeah. You know. So what about any of your earliest performances? I mean, what was one of your earliest performances?
The early performances were pretty drunken, shambolic affairs, and I think people, they were very busy gigs, but they weren't busy because the music was great. They were busy because we were teenagers and everyone wanted to make out with someone, so that's where the party was at, you know. It took us a while to realize that just because 100 or 200 people show up doesn't actually mean that anyone likes your music. They're there because so and so is going, and that one's going, and she's looking hot tonight, and he's looking good tonight, and you know, there's probably going to be a good after party. And so the early performances were a party. Yeah. You know?
Okay. Yeah, right. That actually sounds very familiar to me. Yeah, those teen days, teen shows. Cool. All right. Well, let's move on to the next song, Happy.
That's one of my favorites of all time.
It's such a great song. I mean,
Keith, you know, Keith's on the mic, and it's and I probably should know this. I should have double checked what the official lyrics say, but I remember at one stage thinking, I need a lover to keep me happy, but I think officially it's, I need your love to keep me happy. But I used to,
I think it goes either way. I think there might be two phrases.
Is there?
I think there might be, yeah.
I'm gonna have a look. I'm gonna Google it after this. But I remember it was a sort of thing that I wasn't really, at the time, it was, you know, that it was pre-Google when I got really into this, and I couldn't work out whether it's I need your love to keep me happy, or I need a lover to keep me happy. So I don't know. But it's just that song is just pure Keith. That is my favorite. I mean, my two favorite Keith songs are Before They Make Me Run and Happy, and Happy is the one for me. That is my, you know,
I think it's Keith. A great one. Yeah. So let's see. Happy. I think the obvious thing here is the speed and simplicity in which this song arrived. You're familiar how kind of fast that came in a very, I guess, a very traditional kind of Keith style.
Yeah.
What's the fastest you ever written a song?
There's one song that I did with my old band and never played it live. I went through a very painful breakup, and the morning, I think it was the morning after I split up with this girl, to be fair, I had a chord change that I'd been playing around with, but nothing, no vocals, no lyrics, no nothing.
Just a riff.
And that song I remember, it's called Sunlight Hits Your Eyes. And I woke up so upset and hungover, and, the world was a terrible place. And I grabbed my guitar and I started playing it and this chord change came, and I wrote all the lyrics, and I wrote the entire song, and I called Hugo, who was the guy who was in Hey Negrita, my previous band with me, and I said, I've got this thing, I need to come and play it to you right now. And he goes, well, what now? We're not meant to, I'm in my underwear. And I was going, I have to come over and play this to you. So I played it to him, and he was going, so what? He said, I love it. What are we going to do? And I said, well, let's record it. And Hugo was a multi-instrumentalist. And so I wrote it that morning, played it to him. We did a quick arrangement on it. I said, I've got an idea for a solo chords. And he's going, cool. What are you thinking? This and that. And I literally wrote and recorded it all in one day, whilst spending some of that time in tears in the corner. So that's pretty quick. There's been a few others which have happened very quickly. The song Valentine came very quickly and almost fully formed. The last song on the new album, which is it's strange because it's 9 minutes 20 long, I think. But that song, I was sitting there, I often do this when I'm noodling around on the guitar. I press record just in case anything comes and I can't recreate it.
Sure.
So I did that, and I started just singing anything that came into my head of this chord change that kept repeating. And none of it had been planned at all in any way, shape or form. I was literally just noodling around. And I recorded this thing, and it went on for 23 minutes, anything that came into my head. Oh. And I then came back to it. I turned it off and went, that was a waste of time. And the next day I listened back to it and I went, there might be something here. And rather than writing new stuff for it, I spent the next few weeks reducing it and taking lines out, and I changed the key, but that song came out fully formed. It was just too long. It had to be edited down.
Oh, wow.
But that was a very strange, I remember the images in my head of my dad. It was a week after my dad passed away. Images of my dad, and then images of my son, and just how fragile life is and how quickly it can disappear. But that song literally came out like that.
Yeah.
I just had to cut bits out to make it work on the record.
How weird. That is the strangest.
It's a really weird one. Yeah. we don't do that one live. It's too freaky for me.
All right. Well, that's cool though. I mean, it's just a beautiful thing because you never know kind of when or how a song is going to come, and that's just one of those ways. So very cool. So there's more here in this song. There's something to be said about the very telling lyrics in regards to Keith's personality. So here's something that I'm going to try for the very first time. We're going to play a little game called "Do You Think Like Keith?"
Okay. Shit.
So
I don't know if I want to think like him or not, but let's try it.
I think it'll be telling. So just taking the lyrics from the song. Well, I never kept $1 past sunset. It always burned a hole in my pants. How are you with money? Do you spend it as soon as you get it, or can you save it?
I've got better. I used to spend it quicker than I could get it.
Oh, okay.
I had a lot of debt for a long time, but I've got better. I've got family now. I have to be better. I'm still
that changes everything.
I still don't plan as well as maybe I could, but I have got a bit better. So
okay.
Yeah.
I
used to think like Keith.
In that regard, let's see. Never made a school mama happy. So school, good or bad?
I was good to start with, and then very bad.
Okay. Never blew a
I got I remember my parents came to one of those parent teacher things, and they were over the moon. They said they want you to go to Oxford, and I was like, right. I said, I'm not doing my exams. And they go, what are you talking about? They say you're allowed, because the school had to allow you to try for Oxford. They wouldn't let anyone do it.
Right.
And I was like, no, I'm leaving after this term, and I'm gonna be in a rock and roll band. So every cliche in the book, but my parents they were not impressed. Needless to say, they're going, you're mad. But so no, I don't think I made them particularly happy most of my school career.
All right. Never blew a second chance.
I've blown a lot of second chances, I think.
Okay.
So yeah.
Always took candy from strangers?
Yes, sadly, yes. I remember there was I remember someone, a guy much older than me, was in the pub, and I was I was 18, I think, at the time. My girlfriend was 17. And this guy, I only found out later that he had, he had my girlfriend in his sights. So he came over and go, "Oh, Felix, how you doing? Here, let me get your whiskey and take a couple of these." And I was going, "How much are they?" And he goes, "No, they're free." And I was like, "Well," I didn't even ask what it was. And I was going, "Oh yeah, now have one of these and another whiskey." And next thing, I was on the floor. I couldn't move. I didn't know what my name was. And yeah, he was walking out the door with my girlfriend, looking at me going, "Look, he's a disgrace. Look at the state he's in." And so I definitely took candy from strangers.
Okay. Whoa. Didn't want to get me no trade. Never want to be like Papa, working for the boss every night and day.
Yeah, no, I know that's why I make music.
Yeah, very opposite, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then that's it. That concludes that round.
Keith like.
Yeah, you have some similarities, but
Yeah.
you know, I think you focus on the better stuff, the more positive things, the less reckless stuff.
Yeah, certainly nowadays.
Yeah, right. All right, next song, Ventilator Blues.
Yeah.
A name that was most likely drawn from the fact that the basement in the Nelcott villa was very poorly ventilated and became sweltering quickly.
Yeah.
What was the most difficult recording situation that you've been in yet?
There was an album we did with my old band, which we had a studio, and it's an old record label that I had, and we had a studio, and it was just finally had it at that point where it worked great. And it was in the basement as well, and the shop above us was changed from just a shop to a hairdressing salon, and they installed a light bank with all these lights with dimmers, and it made all our equipment hum. And we were meant to be making this record, and the album ended up being called The Buzz Above because it was just buzzing. Everything you plugged in would buzz. So we then had to make the record when the hairdressing salon shut. We had to start our session in the evening and work through the night. And it was a disaster, an absolute disaster. The record ended up sounding good eventually, but it was a very, very difficult situation when every time you're ready,
right,
that was probably the worst.
Yeah, that takes away from the magic, right? Because then you have to kind of like plan to work as opposed to just working whenever you feel it. Oh, well, that sucks. Is that record available? Where can I find that?
Yeah, I've got a copy here actually.
Oh, there okay.
Hey Negrita, The Buzz Above. Should in theory be available still on Amazon. It's definitely on Spotify and
okay, so I can listen to it.
Yeah.
All right, I will do that.
I tried to get rid of most of the buzz, so hopefully it's all right.
I'll see what I can turn. I'll listen to it with the headphones on. I'll see what it comes out like. All right, next song, Shine a Light.
Oh, well, it's just, I saw them play that when I went to see them the first time on the Voodoo Lounge tour. I saw them at Wembley Stadium, and Mick said, "Oh, we're going to try something we haven't played in a long time." And they played that song, and I was in floods of tears. I was crying like a baby.
Right.
It was just, I don't know. I can't even put a finger on it. I just think it's just, for me, I don't know. I couldn't put a finger on it. It was just, the tears just were flying out of me.
Yeah. Well, some songs have that feeling, right? They do that to you, and like it's unexplainable sometimes.
Yeah. It's just I think it's one of the most beautiful pieces on this record, because you've got that, like Sweet Virginia has a real tender side to it as well, that acoustic thing. But this has got something sort of bordering on gospel to it. And it's not chaotic. It's just very calm. And for me, it's one of my favorite songs of all time, that.
Yeah. I can see why. So this song, a now legendary song in the catalog, and also a touching tribute to possibly Brian Jones. In the lyrics, Mick sings, "Make every song your favorite tune." Considering some of the recent loss that you've endured, if there's one thing you could hope for, any of them, what would it be?
One thing I could hope for
anyone that you've lost.
What can you hope for them once you've lost them? I'm not sure.
Well, because in this song, like, the lyrics make every song your favorite tune. I mean, I feel that's Mick singing that to Brian Jones, saying like, hey,
yeah, maybe, yeah. God, what would I hope? I think peace, probably, is all I could hope for the people I've lost.
Right. Yeah. It's so weird what, that idea. It's always perpetually kind of in there somewhere, rattling around, being like, well, where are they? What are they experiencing? What's happening now?
Yeah.
What will I experience when that comes for me?
And I just don't know if what they're experiencing is, if they're in it. I don't know. I'm not, I don't even know what my beliefs are with this, but I'm just wondering, we always think they'll be looking back at us,
right?
But maybe they're not. Maybe they're looking forward to the next thing that we don't even know yet. I don't know.
Right. Like a reincarnation. I don't know if you believe in that.
Yeah, maybe. I don't really know what I believe. It may be reincarnation, and maybe they're on to the next big trip that we don't even know about yet. Who knows?
Right. Yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah, it's hard. That one's a hard one, but yeah, I think peace.
Okay. That sounds good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on to the next one, which is equally kind of a tough one, difficult subject, Soul Survivor. So this one, the lyrics here are slightly convoluted. I guess the main takeaway, though, would be, again, being a theme of hope in the face of adversity. Having taken some of the experiences you've gone through recently and turned them into something beautiful and positive in your new album, People in Cars. What advice can you lend to people going through a hard time?
It depends very much what the hard time is, I suppose. Unfortunately, it's always the cliches, isn't it, that ring true. That's why they're cliches. And I've been in times when it's been very difficult, where you break it down. You always hear them say in recovery, one day at a time, or just for today, or whatever.
Right.
That doesn't just work for booze and drugs, and it's not just days. I've had it when I've tried. I had in the first week or two of my time out in America, where I was clinging to the bed and trying to get through the next 5 minutes because there was someone 2 doors down the hall who had exactly what I needed to make me feel better, and it's just hanging in there, isn't it? And you just don't know, and you don't know if things might just get better, and if they don't, we're all going to be dead soon anyway. And so I hate to sound gloomy, but in 100 years from now, not many of us will be there unless they actually freeze us or something.
Right.
So the bad stuff will end soon enough, but you never know. And I found that recently, when it's not a really, really, really hard time, but just when I'm having a really dark day, I sometimes find that I wake up the next day and the situation hasn't changed, but my outlook has. Yeah. And it suddenly feels manageable. And nothing's actually changed. It's the same crap. But I maybe had a better night's sleep. And maybe I do a lot of writing. I try to write 3 pages every morning. First thing in the morning when I have my coffee. And sometimes a lot of stuff gets processed. And you go in and you go, that's all shit. I cannot deal with it. I cannot believe what's happened to my life. And 40 minutes later, you're like, all right, so what I need to do is this and this. And then, and everything just feels more manageable. So obviously there are people out there at the moment, like at any time in history, but at the moment, obviously we see what's happening in Ukraine, and over here, that's all we see on the news. And you just go like, yeah, it's easy for me to say that, right. I'm safe here in London, and, of course, so I'm not suggesting that, this is applicable universally. I'm just saying, for me, that sometimes hanging in there for a minute, this is quite a useful thing. The other bit of advice I heard in an interview years ago, not a music-based interview, but it was an interview where they were talking. Someone was, I think it was Joe Malone, who has the perfume brand, bizarrely was being interviewed, and I was interested in what she had to say. And she said, they said, any advice for a budding entrepreneur? And she said, never make a life-changing decision when you're not feeling your best and when life is getting you down. Don't make big decisions. Wait till you're feeling at least a little bit better before you do something stupid that you end up regretting. And I think that's part of the same thing. If it's bad, just dig in and hold on. That's what I've tried to do whenever, and I try not to make any stupid decisions, massive decisions during that time.
Just give it a beat.
Yeah. And if you can, pick up a guitar or do something, and just, and the writing that I do now every day is something that has helped me enormously. It's helped me sleep better at night. And I just write 3 pages every morning, anything that comes into my head, just stream of consciousness, doesn't matter. Coffee's good, ooh, bit hot, whatever, I'm still pissed off with so-and-so. Oh shit, I forgot to do that email. Doesn't matter. But I always find the first half of page is just rubbish. By the time you get to page 2, things start to come up that are clearly bothering you under the surface. And often by the end of page 3, I've resolved it, or I sort of know what I need to do. And it's been a practice that's really helped me through. And when I watched, I watched my father, die in front of me, having spent the whole night with him. I couldn't sit down and write 2 verses and a chorus about that. That's not possible. But I could write stream of consciousness, and a lot of stuff came out. And bizarrely, a lot of what came out there ended up being some of the best, or my favorite lyrics and most honest lyrics on the album. So I didn't sit down and write this, and trying to create something. It just came out like that. And, so I find that's a really helpful thing, just to write anything with no purpose in mind for it. It can just be thrown in the bin afterwards. I never read back. I've got piles and piles of books here of these 3 pages every day. I've never gone back to read over them.
Oh, wow.
I will one day, maybe, but I just don't. I just write the next 3 pages, and it's, it helps me sleep at night.
Sure. I know. I'm sure it does. And just to kind of explain that a little further, I mean, do you feel like having purpose is like helps in a difficult time?
Yeah. I mean,
if you set a task, if you kind of tell yourself like, I've got to do something.
I think so, massively. There's a very famous book about this called Man's Search for Meaning. And I don't remember the author's name, and I should. He was a very young, successful, up and coming psychiatrist in the Second World War. And he ended up in one of the concentration camps. And most of the people around him died. And he was fascinated by this idea that some of the people who survived the camps were the ones who had some purpose. And often they could give away their last cigarette or their last piece of bread, and they'd still make it because they had a purpose. And he survived, and he wrote this book, and then came up with a whole type of therapy, which is about finding your patient's purpose in life. And the whole thing is that if you have a purpose, you can endure stuff, and it just having meaning to your life is according to this guy, is one of the main cures and one of the things that keeps us going and that makes for a happy life as well. So I think finding a purpose was, for me, so many people that I went through when I got clean, who were in with me trying to get clean as well, and very few of them made it. And I was very, very lucky that I had a purpose. I had this thing, I'm going to make a fucking record. And when it's done, I'm going to go back to doing all the bad stuff because I can't give up anyway, and I'm hopeless and blah, blah, blah. I just need to make this record. And that by the time I got anywhere near to even writing enough for a record, I was better. And then I was getting a little bit better again. And it was having that purpose. And a lot of the other kids didn't have a purpose. There was nothing. They got bored out of their minds after a while, going, I don't want to work at 7-Eleven anymore. I need to do something. Whereas I was always going, no, I'm going to yeah, I'm going to be successful. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And I found that it was a lifesaver for me.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, I think that's great. I looked it up, by the way. Viktor Frankl.
That's it. Yes. And my brother will kill me that I forgot his name. But at least I remembered the title.
Yes, that's true. You got that.
The first half is a memoir of his time in the camps.
Yeah.
And it's brutal. And the second half is his philosophy.
Okay.
Or not philosophy, his psychological theory, and how he then put that into practice in a very successful therapeutic school. It's really interesting. It's an amazing book.
Okay. I might have to try to give that a shot, because it seems like
it's fascinating.
It's gonna right up my alley at this point in my life. So
yeah.
All right. Well, I think we've done it. Felix, this has been a great honor to speak with you. Yes. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm so sorry for being late. But yeah, it was a pleasure. It's a pleasure getting to know you and talk to you about such a great record.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I've really enjoyed it. I love talking about this record, as you can tell.
Yeah. And I work it in so that you can talk about yourself as well as talk about your record and the process too, which is great. It's always good to know those things.
Thank you so much.
Not a problem. Is there anything you need to promote? Like, is there anything coming up that we need to know about immediately aside from this record coming out in the United States?
The record's coming out, and yeah, look us up and share us responsibly.
Any US tour?
I hope your listeners enjoy the music.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure somebody will. Yeah. I mean, it's great stuff. I mean,
thank you.
US tour at all time in the sites?
Hopefully next year. I think this year it's all still very difficult with visas and travel and
sure.
So I think next year.
Okay. Well, I will keep posted. I will.
You never know. Maybe towards the end of this year. Who knows what they rustle up for us? But my guess is Europe next, and then America is my guess at the moment.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. I mean, I just hope to come see you out here at some point.
That'd be great.
All right.
Well, thank you so much. Really nice to meet you, and thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Felix. Great talking to you.
Bye-bye.